Good morning, everyone. Welcome to
Very good.
the
Good
G.I.
morning.
Joe 3D printing podcast at
Good
our
morning.
somewhat regular scheduled time.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So, with us today, Sean Huxter, Jim Egner, and Brad Curry. So, long story short, a couple months ago, the G.I.JOE Show Facebook page posted a video of a panel these gentlemen did, and I started watching it, and like right away, they were kind of just saying all the same stuff we say, and I was like, we got to get these guys on. But it's kind of this universal thing that when you've been doing this stuff, 3D printing for a little while, there's certain things that just kind of reign true and bubble to the surface. So, without any further ado, if you guys wouldn't mind introducing yourself, Sean, if you want to go first.
Okay, I'll go first. Sean Huxter. I run a little company called, well, it's not a company as such, a little place called Huxter Labs. I make things for G.I. Joes, mostly the 6-inch 12-inch G.I. Joes, mostly adventure team themed. I sell most of my stuff through Cotswold Collectibles. I don't make many personal sales. For me, the hobby is 3D printing, is making the prototype, making fun models, making one for myself, and then because other people tend to want them, I make some and give them sell them to Greg, and he sells them on to other people. I've been doing it since 2013, and we can talk more about it later and go on to the next guy.
Cool, Jim.
Well, Jim Egner here, TK560, if some of you might know me as that. I've been doing 3D printing now since, not quite as long as Sean, but I don't know, 7 or 8 years now. And mostly focusing on the 1/6 scale original adventure team era 1970s G.I. Joes and the military era, the 1960s G.I. Joe stuff. And most of what I've been doing is replicating parts. That was sort of my thing. Was I can't afford to collect these little dainty styrene plastic pieces that are 50 years old that are brittle and falling apart. I need to make my own. So I started out with the Tank Commander tripod, and that was from about 1967 or thereabouts. And they were hard to find and fragile when you did find them, and expensive. And so that was sort of my introduction to that. So I can go on for hours if you need me to, but I'll let Brad, say his spiel there. So go, Brad.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Hopefully you're not getting too much feedback. I'm pretty sure it's my speakers, but yeah, I'm Brad Curry with Be Active Toys. I've been kind of doing parts since I think we started about 2018. My son and I started around 2018 or 2019. I'm actually a industrial technology and a manufacturing engineering professor. So I have a pretty rigid dogma that I follow in terms of 3D printing. I've actually been aware of and have had 3D printing on the academic side. Well, really going back to the early 2000s. It's a love-hate relationship for me.
Yeah.
My son, especially because I'm a tool and die machinist, by trade. So I prefer, a lot of students forget about all the other manufacturing processes to make parts other than 3D printing. But my son kind of got me involved, and while he was in high school, he wanted to get a 3D printer, and I kind of, because of my love-hate relationship, kept pushing him off on it. Finally, I think it was his senior year in high school, he had saved up money, and I was like, hey, it's your money, go ahead. And then, of course, when he brought it in, I'm like, well, here's a couple of parts I need for my stuff, and we kind of went on from there. So I pretty much do whatever I'm interested in doing, whether it's a part that I need. Originally, when we first went, and other people, like the guys down in at Kentuckiana, and of course the guys down at Jolana and stuff, when they first started knowing a lot of stuff early on, was kind of at collectors' requests. Now I pretty much concentrate predominantly on stuff that I'm interested, but I do stuff, and the website, my Etsy page, has things in all different scales as well. I tend to like all the Marks play sets, all the Marks toys, as well as I'm a adventure team collector as well. Now, I will tell you guys this, since you guys are doing 1/18 and 1/12 scale, I told my son about 4 years ago that we needed to start designing parts for all the 3 3/4 inch Joe vehicles.
Yep.
Time was the limiting factor as far as drawing and designing all those parts to do it. So we never really got down to it. And so you guys kind of beat us to that in that regard. But I've been watching everybody and what everybody's been doing for, pretty much the last 6 years. And so that's kind of me in a nutshell as far as how I got involved in this. And I too, even though I've got the business as Be Active Toys and I run it as a business, it is not my full-time gig. It is a hobby, and that's I think I get a lot of customers sometimes that they think that I'm Amazon. In some ways, it's like, hey, number one, this process isn't that fast, and number two, this is my hobby. It's not my full-time job. So if you expect something in 2 days from now, I'm not your guy. So find someplace else. But
You're print to order.
I'm sorry.
So it's like print to order. Like if they order it, then you print it.
I print to order. Yeah, I mean, I've got and Jim and Sean. Well, I mean, Sean really is kind of probably even more specialized. Early on, Jim and I have kind of probably been tag team. When I first started doing it, I looked and saw, okay, what parts haven't been done. So if somebody said, hey, I need this part, I'm like, well, I'm not going to take my time to design that because Jim's doing it. So go to Jim or somebody else had it. And so I didn't really I concentrated on the other stuff that wasn't being done first. So you've had that kind of going on, but yes, it's print to order. I think I've got well over 300 different parts in my parts library that I have made to sit there. And for me, as a home-based hobby business, to sit there and stock all those, it just isn't practical. So yes, I pretty much do everything make to order. So
okay.
I have a small inventory of parts. When opportunity presents itself, I'll print off a batch of a particular part, but most of the stuff is I'm just barely ahead of the orders getting those things printed up. So yeah, not quite mostly print to order.
Yeah. Mostly, Brad, you're feedbacking.
Sorry.
Most of my stuff's original. I started off with a couple of repro parts with the ATV rails. I tried those, and I tried the little connector for the ATV2, the MSV support vehicle. And I just it didn't interest me. And then because I was such a fan of the Adventure Team and the Turbocopter, which was the wonderful thing where you flip the little button and you spin the thing and you fly around. So I decided to upgrade that, and the first thing I 3D printed for G.I. Joe was the Helijet, or the G.I. Joe concept back then in the Adventure Team was the action pack, right? So your vehicle broke down and was carried on the back of the adventure, including the big heavy escape car, which we don't talk about because it's ridiculous, but it's fun. So this breaks down, and it's on a strap, right? So G.I. Joe carries it on his back, but it's also the same harness. And then the engines come off the side and attach here, and there's a thumb wheel here that makes the engines rotate and angle so you could fly around. And basically, my idea was to upgrade the Turbocopter, and that's what got started. And so yeah, most of my stuff is original. I don't tend to do repro parts, but there's a huge market for that. Lots of people want them. So, but to me, the hobby is the creation, the modeling, the frustrating aspect of getting that prototype to work, and that to me is the fun. So that's why I mostly do original stuff.
Okay, excellent.
And I will kind of concur on that. As a drafting professor, the main thing for me is the design and the creativity. I mean, yes, I can have and we can back engineer all the parts, but I much prefer to do my own creative designs, whether it's coming straight out of my own head or whether I'm taking concepts and ideas from 3 3/4 inch world and migrating them over into the 1/6 scale for my Adventure Team or other stuff. And that will kind of, I mentioned as far as being as a drafting instructor, being kind of curtailed, since this concept is about the difference in scales, I will say that I teach all my students, and when we design and when we draft in the scale basically 1-to-1. So whatever size it's going to be at the manufactured level, we are designing that at that 1-to-1 scale. And of course, in that regard, 3D printing has kind of changed that, because we can basically draw in one scale and then do the scale factors and scale ratios to kind of print out stuff in the other way, although that doesn't always work well.
Right.
Yeah, the tolerances change, so you got to be careful there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been that's kind of the big thing is those tolerances tweaking and trying to make some people understand it. So a lot of for us, because what we're trying to typically do in 1/12 for the 6-inch figures, it's really kind of stealing the Real American Hero 1/18 scale stuff from the 80s and upscaling it, and the designs don't necessarily work as both. And so it's interesting.
I took that Helijet and I made a Super Joe version of it, which is 66.6%, so 1/3 smaller, and that actually worked out without any issues. So all the tolerances worked, luckily, because they don't always. The only problem is the joysticks, because the Super Joe hands are inflexible and larger. I had to upscale the joysticks, but everything else worked fine.
Interesting.
Okay. Well, yeah, you'll find that certain things just have to be tweaked every time you do a scale change. So that's the real issue with going up and down.
As a funny experiment early on, I did one of my aerial drones, which is this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I scaled it just to test it. I scaled it down to 66%, 50%, and like 33%, and every one of them worked, which is really weird. The detail just kind of gets lost because the printers, after you get so small, it's not worth it because the detail's not there. But the all of the functions still work even at that small scale. So it does work in theory, but just like I said, you still have to make adjustments because it doesn't always fit the scale of the figure you're trying to work with.
So I'm looking around at all your cool stuff you've got behind you, and because of your scale, your things are bigger. Are you guys all kind of leaning into FDM versus resin because of that?
Yeah, I mean, I have 2 resin printers. I use them for very small parts because of the detail. I use them for these cool little cyber or steampunk pistols and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But to do something as big as this in resin is very daunting task, and resin fails so often that I wouldn't think about it. For small parts, however, it cannot be beat.
Yeah.
Resin printers are perfect for making miniature figures and small detail things. Like, for example, if I was going to do anything for the 3 3/4 G.I. Joes, it would have to be resin because you need the detail at that scale.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a little bit with resin. I'm not a fan of it. It's too toxic and stinky, and it's messy, and there's lots of cleanup, and just, I don't know, It's just generally a pain. I did these, y'all may or may not be familiar with the windshields for the sea sleds for the G.I. Joes. Resin's about your only option if you want to do clear. And even then, it's a multi-step process because the clear part
is not clear.
It's not clear. You have to seal it with the clear coat, and it's just a real big pain. And I'm like, I would love to have a different way of doing this. I've been playing around. We have a maker space at the university where I work, and we have an injection molding machine. Brad could probably tell you all about it. That's probably where I'm going with some of the parts that I would really like to do in clear, and not fight the resin part of it.
Definitely. So, wow.
Yeah.
It just occurred to me I should get a job at a university.
Well, it has its perks sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will go ahead and kind of mimic that again. Sorry about the feedback. But yeah, it's like anything. Part of understanding the 3D printing process is also understanding your manufacturing processes or how it's going to be made. I've got both resin printers and FDM printers. There are advantages to both, and there are some parts that I only use resin, not too many, because I'm kind of like Jim and Sean. I don't really like the smell or the mess or the process of dealing with resin. However, if I'm doing some smaller weapons, that's what I have to use my resin printer for those weapons just to get the detail I want. I prefer, and of course, I usually am much more on mechanical part side. So I prefer FDM. I think is a better piece of equipment in order to make FDM or to make mechanical parts. I've done head sculpts for and other what I would refer to as organics. Obviously, organics work much better on a resin printer because of the detail and the shape. But again, we can get into different organics, and that's also talking about now you're also getting into your design process to get those files when you're talking about head sculpts versus mechanical parts. And just because my background as a manufacturing engineer, I prefer the mechanical side much more than the organics.
Yeah, I got a mechanical thing here. So this is FDM printed, and I wouldn't do this in resin because this is using, there's like several gears in here. It's very noisy right now, which is why I haven't produced this yet. But this is all using gears inside with one motor. One motor drives about 4 different gears, and there's one over here that like does a 90-degree angle and stuff, which is broken right now, so you don't see it turning. But
hold on.
FDM makes gear impossible.
That is
All right. Please, if you wouldn't mind, give us another demo of that.
Okay, so like this is like I'll call this the environmental analyzer, and it fits on the rack system that I made. But there's a slow motor in here that I bought on eBay, which has gears and stuff. So it rotates like maybe this fast, which is great because most rotors spin so fast you can't really use them. So the first thing it does is it sits. The motor there's a drum under here, which is this thing. This thing drives this antenna. Then inside there's a swing arm that makes this one reciprocate back and forth. Mm-hmm. And then over here, although unfortunately it's broken now, this radar is on a 90-degree gear, and that spins at the same time. So when you turn this on, one antenna rotates all the way around, and the other reciprocates. And I think it's the reciprocating engine that's causing all the noise, which is why I haven't produced this as a set yet. And inside the barrel, there's an LED. There's a really cool trick that I play with the LED that makes this display work. Yeah. It's basically 2 slots kind of interacting together with one LED inside. And that's all run by the one gear. And then I put this extra thing, which is the Dollar Tree Santa nose, just to make this thing happen here. So this is a set I'm trying to produce, but that you can hear it, right? The noise. Yeah. If I can't fix that noise, I don't want to sell it. But I think it's just a matter of the rough top surfaces of 3D parts can rub up against things. They need to be sanded down, which I haven't done yet. Or maybe use a piece of Mylar plastic in between to kind of make those bumps not connect to each other and stuff. But other than that, this is FDM's real excellent purpose. You can make anything you want out of gears with an FDM, and it'll just work fine.
That is incredible.
I just have to have you lubricated the inside?
No, because what are you going to do? Re-lubricate every now and then? FDM doesn't really need lubrication in general. It's just right now, I'm sure some rough surfaces are rubbing together in a way that I can prevent. But because it's a closed system, I can't really see inside while the gears are working and say, oh, that's where the problem is. Yeah. So that's kind of a tough thing to troubleshoot.
I will say, Sean, is it possible? Because it almost sounds like your mounting distance between your gears might be a little off, so that the gears are slipping.
This is why we rapid prototype.
Yeah, and that's really, 25 years ago when 3D printing came out, that was really the purpose of 3D printing, was for the prototyping, where you could design something and kind of get instantaneous feedback on whether those parts fit together and did it and reacted the way you wanted to be, or wanted to go. So, 3D printing has mostly been involved in prototyping, although nowadays with metal printers and other stuff, it's starting in industry to kind of go more into where now we're actually using 3D printing in metal to make parts that, quite frankly, the geometry on those parts wouldn't be available to produce in any other way. We're still at that downside of it takes so freaking long to do that. So, and that's, of course, I'm kind of like Jim there too. If I can take and make a mold, so I'm getting into the process now where I'm also making molds, but I don't want to do like hand casting or hand molds. It is really more of an injection molding type thing. That's really just like the toys were made back in the day. The companies spent all the money to make injection molds, and then they could get large volumes of production out of those, and it was done very fast and quick. And so a lot of times too, our 3D printed, even whether it's FDM or resin, the strength of those materials aren't quite the same as like the original plastics and stuff.
Right.
So there is some durability issues there with that people have to be aware of. These are great to kind of get our stuff back up and kind of currently working, but there are limitations to the 3D printing process as well.
True.
So what I do is I try to make sure that all of I won't sell a toy if it's fragile. Like if you're going to break it in the first 5 minutes, forget it. I'm not selling it. So the strength aspect of 3D printing and FDM is kind of specific. You have to know what you're making, and you have to understand the orientation you want to print it at. If you're going to make a long, thin shaft, you can't print that vertically because those things snap like twigs. On the other hand, you print them horizontally, you get kind of lines all over it, but you can't break that thing. Like those layers are really strong. So for some things, you have to break it apart. You print some things horizontally, you print some things vertically. Once you get past a certain thickness, a vertical cylinder is unbreakable as well. But as you start getting thinner and thinner, those things are like twigs. They snap. So my Helijet, the connecting forks where the engines fit on are printed horizontally and then glued back in place. And super glue glues that thing like a strong weld. You can't break that. If you super glue two FDM ABS parts together and you try to pull them apart, you'll break the plastic before you break the bond. So you put those in there with super glue, and they're never coming out. And then they're never going to break either because they're printed horizontally, so that the forking, the bending of the fork is done this way, and you don't get any kind of stress on the layers. Other stuff, the shafts that come out to the engines are printed vertically because they're so big that you can't break them as well. And then you get the smoothness of the cylinder, which is what you get when you print vertically. Every single piece has to be considered as to how you're using it and how you're going to print it.
Sean has a great point there. You don't want to make your toy fragile, and you don't want the 3D printing process to exacerbate that. I've been working on this. I don't know if you guys know what that is or not. That's the outboard motor for some of the late issue Adventure Team G.I.JOE stuff. And the mount, try to get it out, this part, it not only does it have to swivel in this direction, it has to swivel in this direction. And it's held together, and the original one was metal rivets were hammered in there and flattened out. I'm basing all of this on the thickness of the FDM's filament as the pins for this thing.
So you're using raw filament as the pin?
Yeah. You try to print something that small, it's just going to be just a disaster.
I've moved to using metal pins, though. I'm using paper clips, coat hanger wire, and other aluminum pipes. I find that once your pin is wide enough, it's fine. Yeah. But when you get really tiny, 3D printed FDM pins are
terrible.
So I start. My favorite is the coat hanger. The axles of my
Spider,
my ground penetrating radar. My axles are coat hanger wire because those don't break.
Yeah.
And they need to be thin. They need to be strong, and they need to be flexible.
Okay. How are you fastening the coat hanger to the wheels? Because I was working on a project where I was doing something like that, and I couldn't figure out the best way to connect the metal rod to the hubcap of the wheel.
So the sneaky thing about these hangers that I got is they're actually coated in plastic. There's like a very thin spray coat of plastic.
Okay.
So I don't shave that away. But even if it was metal, I would use probably binary epoxy. But for these coat hangers, a little bit of super glue, and they bond incredibly well. And also the tolerance is really tight too. So when I jam that axle in over the wheel, it's not coming out.
It's not. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and I will kind of mirror that. As I've gone through, part of that is all in the design phase and making things work out. So, so early on, so of course, this is a piece for the Navarone play set. From the late 70s that Mark's did. And originally there is there's kind of a pin in both these that locked into the mount. And early on when I was doing this as a one-piece assembly as well. and that pin on the side would break quite frequently. It would just shear off because it's small, and the layer lines would do it. So that's instant. And I don't know with the lighting, you can see that. So I do the same thing where now that's a hole, and I make another part that's a pin that I basically press in there. So I've never had any break off or fail out there any time since then. Likewise, on last year, I did the field radio as a show special for the Kentuckiana show. And initially on this, I was trying to do the later version where it had 2 ball pins and it was like a ball and socket type thing. Well, that just didn't really work. And then I don't know why. And I had messed with this design for well over a year trying to get this figured out. And I don't know why. And then just one day I was going back through some of my collection, and I pulled one of my old MP radios, and I'm like, it was the pin connection that Hasbro did on that first. So I'm like, well, duh, that's the way to do it. So like now when I make these are swivel, and of course I do the same thing where I make my own rivet. So I print out my own rivets and press that in there. So you do have all of these different ways that you're looking at it from the design perspective. And I also, just like Sean, I do because I'm a big collector of the Legends of the West line as well. So I make my own buckboard wagons, and I use a coat hanger for the axles on those. Now I also 3D print the little hubcaps, so to say, on there, and I glue those on over the stage wagon wheels, so they'll stay on as well. So so you just have to kind of think about creative, and this is all part of problem solving, trying to figure out how you're going to get these things to work.
Here's an example I did where I use paper clips. So this is a centrifuge, and I set it up to work on a USB-C power connector. I'm using a simple motor, like 3-volt motor, and then you turn it on, and the centrifuge spins, and all the buckets swing out. And so these are meant to be a centrifuge for medical purposes and stuff, something Greg and I have been talking about for a while to do a medical set. And each of these buckets, when I take the bottle out, is connected by a paper clip. This happens to be a plastic coated paper clip, and then this way you can exchange buckets with different ones. You just pop it up here, and it spins with. If I tried to use a tiny plastic pin for that, this is like they'd fly off. They just break.
Yeah.
And we're gonna spin down. So this is all part of the process. It's trying to figure out what materials to use. It's all contextual. I can use, and I'm always going to the Dollar Tree, because you can find some stupid thing at the Dollar Tree, and whereas everybody else sees the stupid thing, you see, oh my God, that's genius, and you take it home, and you put that into a toy. Most of my toys that have electronics in them, most of them, are things I found at Dollar Tree, including the ground penetrating radar, which uses the Dollar Tree headlamp. That's all it is. I got a magnet in here, so it fits in, and then this just slots right down in place. There's a little button I put in here, and this button connects to the button on the...
Presses that button.
You just slot that in place, close the lid. $1.25. Used to be $1, now it's $1.25.
Wow.
But, you find stuff and you use it, because the 3D printing is great, but you can't do everything with the 3D printer. Like, one of the things I'm doing now is I'm using these finger lights. Yep. And these are like $5 for 5 or $1 for a few. And the finger light I'm using on my new submersible. So the finger light lights up the face of the submersible and the lights below. And that's just a finger light. It's inside here. And if you pull the face down, the finger light is just right here.
Yeah.
Yep. So you put the face up, the finger light then shines out through here. And this sphere, Jim, you're going to love this, because this is clear plastic, but this is a Santa Claus nose from the Dollar Tree.
Nah, found parts. Okay, fresh build up there. Okay, yeah.
Which is the same Santa nose I used on that analyzer. Yeah. But I used the electronics for that, and I used the bubble for this. So the thing comes in 2 halves. You unscrew it. One half is a perfect sphere, and the other half is not. You can use that for something else. But I made it so that when you push the tail forward, you're actually pushing the switch on the finger light, And and Jim and Brad, you're going to want to pay attention to this because this light is up here. What's powering these lights down here in this, like, there's nothing down there.
Right.
I'm using clear filament as fiber optic.
You're doing a light pipe.
Mhm.
So there's a fiber optic cable running from here down into these things, and you don't even see it. It's all within the housing, but yet, and what I did recently is I put a filter on here. So if I want to put a white finger light in there, this will light up red, but these will light up white.
Oh, okay.
And there's another one too. If you go on Amazon, you find cool things. This is the searchlight. This is a new kind of light. I've never used these before, but I found them on Amazon, and they are just they're little lights, three batteries inside, and you just screw them up on like so, and they light up. And this is bright as hell. You can't even look into it. It's too bright. And then I put the little cap over that, and I put that inside a searchlight. And now I've got a functioning searchlight for my submersible. And my submersible, now here's an example of pins. These engines spin or tilt. I'm using FDM printed pins for those because they're thick enough, and I'm printing them horizontally for strength. So there's no metal in these for pins. And the claw, which is a scissor geared claw that opens up 3 fingers. When you pull back on the, let me just take it off. It's easier. You pull back on this little shaft here and push forward, and you get the 3-fingered claw, like so.
No, that's too cool.
That's using like Brad talked earlier, kind of like ball pins, right? There's no pin in here. There's just 2 little balls at the end that fit into slots so that the fingers can each work in this head here.
Yeah.
So it's whatever you find that's useful, and Dollar Tree is a huge source of great inspiration.
So my takeaway from this is, if you go hunting Santa Clauses, you use every part of the Santa Claus.
Yes,
and none of it goes to waste.
The worst thing is Santa noses only show up in like October, November, so you got to buy them all, take them home, because the day after Christmas they throw them out. I literally went there one day and they were gone. I figured I'll wait till after Christmas. I'll go get some. Gone. I asked the manager, so where are they? Oh, we throw them out because they have batteries in them and they won't last till next year. So they throw them out.
Wow.
Don't let that happen. Go get them.
Yeah.
I wonder how they feel about dumpster diving.
I don't know where they throw them out, whether they ship them back to the manufacturer to throw them out or the warehouse or whatever, but they do throw those out. So buy them up when you see them. Dollar Tree is a very opportunistic place.
Yep.
It seems.
And I will kind of go ahead and mirror that image too, especially over the years when I've been doing some of the trade show specials that I've worked in conjunction with some of the other dealers. Especially, I'll give a shout out to Steve Stovall and Kentuckiana show that's coming up here next weekend. But in the past, I've done a couple of show premiums where I've had him worked with him, and of course we've also kind of pulled dollar store stuff that we've modified. Just be careful and understand. I don't remember if it was last year or the year before. We originally had so many pieces, and then we decided to up the quantity. So we went back and bought some more. But there was a changeover in production from the first grouping that we bought to the second grouping. So, and of course, I was making like the towers on here that were all designed to fit on the first batch that we had bought from the dollar store. The second batch was a little smaller, so these didn't fit, and that caused us some issues and problems. So you got to kind of, you just have to be aware of that. But thinking about some other pin connectors too, here's another little Canon. Now, this is a brad nail that I use just to kind of prove out the prototype. And that was a way to get these stuck. But of course, you got to be careful with some of the stuff that's out there that you're using, especially I don't really sell this, and I say none of my stuff is for kids. But to be in reality, once you start putting this stuff out there, you never know how it's going to be used or whether somebody's going to buy it and give it to kid. And I would hate to think that a kid would be using that and that brad nail get pulled out and then they would get hurt. So you kind of, from the design perspective, you sometimes have to think about those issues when you get into this type of stuff as well. And not that at this point, none of us are really talking too much about product liability. We're all still kind of doing this as a hobby. I'm always kind of wondering what will happen as this becomes much more and more mainstream. And as people start to buy this, it's great and it's cool what we're doing. But I always kind of worry, again, this is probably just my background in manufacturing, about potential product liability aspects there too.
Yeah. And honestly, I like it. It's pretty prolific at this point. If you go onto Etsy, you can find hundreds of people selling 3D printed whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a real good point.
Yeah, I use nails in this jetpack because the handles are printed vertically because I needed the detail. But these snap like twigs, so there's a very small finishing nail going up through here, and that provides all this extra strength.
Yeah.
But it's well sealed in there. I mean, I don't think you'd ever get to see the nail that's inside there. So it. But those are things you have to be careful of. And as Brad mentioned, the Brad's Brad nails. That's something you have to think about. You want to make it so that it's either completely enclosed or just you cannot get it out. Right. That can be difficult too. But it's all part of the design process. It's every part of the design process you have to think about.
And I will say on those, anytime I'm using something like that, I will either grind the point down or I'll use some snips and I'll snip the point off just to kind of get rid of those sharp edges.
The ATV trailer uses a nail for the connector to the ATV hook, and that is a 1-inch thick nail. And I do actually take the Dremel, I cut the tip off, and then I do a very careful shave around to make it rounded. So there's no way anybody could hurt themselves. And other than that, there's no metal parts on this. Well, there's screws, but to connect all this together. But screws are screws. You're gonna have to use them. But when it comes to like nails and sharp things, yeah, use a Dremel, grind it down, and reduce the possibility of that causing any kind of an issue.
Have any of you used Gloop?
I don't know what that is, so no.
Gloop is it's a glue, and it's specifically made for 3D printing, and it's like a thick, it's almost got a consistency like rubber cement, but it kind of it forces the like PLA to fuse.
Okay, I use most ABS, but yeah, most people use PLA these days. Super glue is perfect for ABS. I have had more.
I'm sorry, if I said ABS, I meant PLA.
Yeah, no, I was saying I work in ABS, which is super glue works beautifully with. PLA, you kind of got to think about it differently with PLA. I don't work with PLA much because my printers just don't do it very well.
Really?
Yeah, I'm using 10-year-old printers, and PLA was an afterthought back then, and I find that every time I try to print something in PLA, it fails in some way. But my ABSs are perfect.
What I'm not a big FDM person. I'm the resin guy. So what's the big difference between the two? Like, I know you got to extrude it at one of them's got to be a higher temp than the other.
ABS is hotter. Yeah, ABS
is hotter.
ABS warps. Yeah, there's a lot of like PLA rarely warps. So if you're going to do something flat, it's going to be flat. ABS does, but there are ways to avoid that. Use borosilicate glass and purple Elmer's glue, and it won't warp, and it's fine. But I think mostly ABS is toxic and PLA isn't.
Okay.
Now, but I say that, but I've been printing an ABS for 10 years, and I'm fine.
We do
typically in terms of strength of materials, ABS is generally stronger than PLA. Your PLA is also for the most part biodegradable. So because PLA is basically made from corn, so it's a corn processing in order to get that. So you have a biodegradable aspect there with PLA that you don't with ABS, but ABS generally runs hotter. And you get a stronger part with ABS.
That's what I'm finding. Yeah.
Also,
and I find that PLA is a little more. I don't know if it's more brittle, but it doesn't bend. It's not as flexible. I've used ABS to make springs and other things, whereas PLA it doesn't seem to have the same flexibility.
Okay. Well,
You can I can get flexibility out of PLA too, and doing that. I kind of prefer. I work a lot of my stuff is in PLA because that's what I prefer to work in myself. But you can do that. Again, it's all a matter of knowing your printers and your processes and trying to get everything dialed in.
Okay. One of the things about PLA versus ABS is end product. You can't leave PLA in the sun.
No, there's a temperature sensitivity to most plastics that are out there. ABS, 3D printed ABS have a problem as well. There's a new product, I would say new, it's sort of new. It's called ASA, and it's UV and water resistant. So it's intended to be used outdoors. And so if you're thinking about anything that's going to be out in the heat or under a lot of UV light, then there is a product out there. The ASA material works pretty well. I'm sure Brad's got a lot more detail on all of that, but just from my experience working in our makerspace, that seems to be the go-to material for anything that's going to be outdoors.
Well, I'll say that my original stuff that I did in 2013, so this is like 11 years ago now, in ABS is still working fine. And well, I don't put it outside, but as for like how long will these toys last? My original jetpack is still over there working perfectly. There's no cracks. There's nothing. This is my original bazooka, and it is absolutely perfect now. And that's 11 years old and still going fine. So, and like I said, I'm not bringing it outside very much, but these are durable products, at least in ABS. I don't know if I had printed these in PLA, what they'd be like today. They might just be fine. I don't know. Jim, you've been printing PLA longer than anybody here, probably. What have you found over time with your early prints? Are they still good?
Most of my early stuff, I'm looking at some of the Space-O-Matic stuff. It's just fine, but it doesn't get exposed to extreme temperatures like it. Sidebar here. I have an old Jeep done up as a Jurassic Park Jeep, and I wanted to put a cup holder in it. And so I 3D designed and 3D printed me a cup holder. Okay. Well, I'm in Texas. It gets unbelievably hot here in the summertime. So that cup holder lasted until it got really hot, and then it just warped all to pieces. And that was because PLA starts to have a flexing point, which is in about 140 degrees. It'll start to distort. ABS won't. Its point of flex is much higher than that. But all these products have a little bit of sensitivity to UV. ASA is intended to be used outdoors and has less sensitivity to it. ABS is probably good for 25, 30 years. The PLA, probably not as long. Yeah.
When I first moved, I bought this house in 2014, so I was just the year after I got my printers. And the first thing I did is I printed the house number and put it on my mailbox in white ABS plastic, and that's still there. It's faded, like it's not as fresh white as it was. Also, I did this thing where I made a model of my house for my wife for Christmas when we moved in, and I actually made one that fits on top of my mailbox, and everybody who walks by loves it. And that thing has been out there for like 6 years or so. And while the only problem with it is the colors of the white has faded, the gray stuff is fine, everything else, but fading is all. There's no cracking. It's worn and weathered, but it's not. It's still there.
And
that's ABS.
Yeah. It would PLA wouldn't have lasted that long.
We're in Massachusetts. We get hot summers. We don't get Texas summers, but we do get hot summers and very cold winters. Yeah, and it's still fine.
What size nozzle are you using for your ABS?
Say again?
Is like the size of the nozzle that you're extruding through? Does that become an issue with ABS or anything?
I just buy standard nozzles for my printer. I don't even think about it. No, I don't. Okay. I don't think about nozzle width.
Okay.
I will say in terms of like some of the temperature differences, even with the PLA, I mean, outside that material, I haven't seen a material degradation on the PLA until, like Jim said, you're up over the 140 or 150 degree mark, where that material starts to become unstable. The bigger issue, I think, with the PLA is the direct sunlight that really cause it to break down. I mean, I've had things in the car Of course, if you're leaving it in a car in the summertime with the windows rolled up, the interior of your car is going to get up to that temperature where it would be. But just sitting out like on a porch or a patio someplace where you'd be at, say, 103 degrees on a really hot summer day, I haven't really noticed. Several years ago, I did a few small experiments just because I was curious, and I haven't really paid too much attention to some of these differences in plastic. On the industrial plastics with industrial 3D printers, again, most of what we're talking about is hobby printers, and there's only a handful of materials that can be used in our hobby printers that we're using, whereas the industrial printers, I think they're up to about I mean, they're well over 50 different types of material plastics that they can print out. But now you're needing industrial printers that are put out by like Stratus and some of the other big industrial printer companies. And quite frankly, as much as I would love to have a $10,000 printer, my wife hasn't agreed to allow me to spend that yet. So.
It's real
When I
interesting.
win the lottery, Brad, I'll buy you one.
It's real interesting to me. You know, we've had this group since 2020. A lot of reproduction parts, a lot of duplicating things. You know, people. You know, we've got people that have moved from this to creating their own toy lines, but I haven't seen anyone really doing the play features that you guys kind of just do because you came from Adventure Team and you were used to that, and that's how your brains work. Real interesting to me.
Yeah, I started out with functional toys. I mean, let's say I'm 60. I was playing with my Adventure Team stuff when I was 7 years old, maybe even younger. Johnny West, everything that has function. When I was one of those kids that took my toys apart to see how they work. So I had this really weird little vehicle. It was a Calliope and I took that thing apart and I found out how that thing worked. And I kind of made myself into an engineer over time by breaking apart my toys. But it's the toy function.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my toys are not solid, unfunctional things. They all have some sort of moving parts and gears. The swing wing is a you know, it's a stowable flying jetpack sort of thing. Everything has to have moving parts for me, just about. You know, there's some exceptions. Like I've been making these safety cones. This one is floor is lava. This one is escape nanobots. You know, radioactive goo spill. You know, but these are solid and these are fun, right? But most of my stuff is movable. I use motors. I use pins. All the things we've already talked about. Because to me, the play feature is in the interactability.
Okay.
Yeah, and I will long say that as a, you know, I give a lot of kudos to Sean for the stuff that he's making and what he's doing, incorporating motors and lights and sound into these designs. It's something that I've long been wanting to do, and of course, in my couple of the courses that I teach, I'm having students do that. So that is, I think, the next step for a lot of people. Of course, that is a lot easier to accomplish in 1/6 scale than it would be in 1/18 scale. But it's definitely an area that is enhancing and bringing much more into the hobby. So I've been kind of professional courtesy and jealousy at the same time of some of the stuff that Sean does on that route.
Oh yeah,
I've been reluctant to. I have really been reluctant to.
It is certainly a great way to.
Sorry, I was saying I'm really reluctant to incorporate electronics because I'm not a good welder or a solderer and stuff. So it's only the last year or so I started doing motors. This is why the Dollar Tree is so great. I'll take the light and just slam it in there. I don't have to weld. I don't have to solder anything or rewire anything. And like this here is like a weather tracker that I made, or a motion tracker, and it's wind up, and it uses a wind up motor I found at Dollar Tree. So like again, I've only really started incorporating electronics when I started the analyzer last year, because I don't like soldering and all the little fiddly bits about setting up batteries and battery compartments. I try to avoid that, but now I'm getting more into it. And what's really finding is useful is the USB-C connector. You can get these little USB-C things that just use the power port. So that, you know, there's USB-C obviously has data channels and everything, but there's 2 wires in there that are just ground and 5 volt. And that allows you to hook it up to any USB-C charger and don't worry about batteries then, right? So there's less soldering, there's less messing around in there. That's why I've been reluctant, but these motors are too useful to ignore.
Yeah, I've been trying to incorporate a video screen in a couple of my projects, and by the time I get something worked up, I can't source that particular little 1.5 inch or up to 3 inch video screen. So I've been trying to find a reliable supplier for some of those small things that I'm working on.
Do you use AliExpress at all? Because they're pretty reliable.
Well, what happens is they'll substitute out. I've been using these keychain. They're like photo. I wish I had one laying around here to grab real quick. They're basically marketed as a keychain photo album is what they're marketed as. And you upload pictures to it, and then you hit the play button, it'll play pictures of whatever you put on there. And so I was putting radar loops and, various things that you might see the adventure team use. And I just about get my design worked around, kind of like the way Sean was doing his light on his ground penetrating radar. And then I go to order a batch of the screens, and they're no longer available. And that's happened to me a couple of times now. So a little bit frustrating.
That's always a problem too. Yeah. When you go to when you're trying to source something like that and you design your product around the source.
Yeah.
Jesus. Years ago, I used that little Santa nose to make lights happen in this scorpion that I made. It was actually a Halloween scorpion you can get at CVS and Target. And we painted it black. And I made a little module for the inside, and the Santa nose was designed perfectly so that the button came out through the ribs, and I could push that button. And then the next year they changed the design, and I could not figure out a way to make it work with the other thing. So that is always a problem, is when you rely on some outside thing and you design your entire toy around that outside thing, and then they change that outside thing, you have to go back to the drawing board.
Yep. Oh yeah, that's happened to me a couple times now. So yeah,
I'm seeing in some of the chats that one of our group members, Benjamin Bentley, says DigiKey and Mauser Electronics is a good outside source. So you might want to look into those.
I love that idea, though, Jim, about using a photo keychain to put video images in and then just slotting that into the toy. I never thought of that. I didn't even know those were available. I'm going to have to look that up.
Yeah, like I say, I have some around here somewhere. I'll look around for them, see if I can find them here real quick.
I'll tell you why. Since October, I've been developing this thing. Now, this thing is obviously not mine. I didn't make this. This is, you get on Amazon, and these are business card holders, and they come in all sorts of colors, and they're real, like Samsonite briefcases, and they even have like the clasps that actually work. Now, here's where I wanted to, the reason you brought up the screen is because when you open up this is a whole thing. And this, I would love for this to be a real screen, but it isn't. Now this one comes up, so it swings upward, so it's like a computer screen. If I could fit something in there, oh my God, that'd be great. And this one, of course, this is a new thing I'm developing, which is I've got a little sensor arm that comes up, a bit like the Voight-Kampff machine from Blade Runner. And there's a little disk drive here that pops up, and then they take these little clear discs that I printed with my Cricut. And if I could just incorporate a screen in there, oh my God, it'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Do any of you guys have a micro center near you? Because that's where I go for that stuff. Micro center.
I don't know.
Yeah, you might want to look into micro center. It's it's like an old school Radio Shack on steroids.
I do have an independent place called Y2 Electronics, I think, out on Route 95 that stocks all sorts of stuff like that, but I haven't gone in there very often.
So where are you, Sean?
Not been incorporating electronics much.
Yeah. Where are you?
I'm in Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. I'll look real quick for you.
Well, I don't know if you can see this or not. This is one of the failed keychain video players. Is basically what this is.
Yep. Pop that video. There you go. Hey, that is really cool.
Yeah, it's batteries are basically dead on it, but you can kind of get a sense of the scale of this thing. It's actually small enough to put in, and it'll play videos. It's got a It's got a little micro SD slot on it. It'll play audio here, so it's actually pretty neat little gadget.
How much did that cost, Jim?
Man, if I'm remembering correctly, it was like $9 or $10. It wasn't terribly
expensive. That's worth it doing for like a prototype in your own personal projects.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd sell those because I try to sell things fairly cheaply. Yep. Like I don't make a lot of profit. I just try to keep myself in filament and the parts and stuff. And, and the way I price my toys is how much would I have paid for that? Not how much effort goes in. I mean, I do not make back the money I put into these things. I just, nor do you, I'm sure. I don't charge anything for design and development because that's my hobby, right?
Yep.
I only charge for the toy, sending it off to be sold. And my only criteria is how much would I pay for that? Not how much effort did I put into it. So $10 thing added to a toy makes that pretty high priced, but I would love it for my own things.
I'm glad that you kind of mentioned that. So, because a lot of people, I've gotten asked over the years a lot of times, hey, can you design this for me? Can you design this for me? Yeah, I can design anything that you want. It's whether you're willing to pay me for it or not, and as a professional designer, generally my hourly rate is somewhere between $50 to $60 an hour. And that's for something that's not that I don't have to put engineering safety factors in it. If I got to kind of put in engineering safety factors, well, now you're up to $100 an hour for me to design that to make sure that it meets that safety criteria. And of course, the reality for most of these side toys, nobody's really going to be willing to pay. Most of this stuff takes, 3-4 hours minimal. And that's on a fairly simple part. So most people aren't going to do it. So from the business side, I don't really charge for my design time either, but I'm hoping that I will sell enough of the parts to kind of make it worth my time and effort, unless it's something that I want for myself, and then I don't care because that's the hobby side of it. But if you think about it,
months to develop.
So you've got to most people don't really understand that, and from the manufacturing side, so because I look at design separate from the manufacturing, and so when I'm pricing out my product and stuff, I think about, well, time and material. So what's the material cost me? How much print does it time? If I've got assembly work, how much is my time worth? So I really, over the last 2 years, I really sit there and think about how much is my time worth? We're all kind of limited with the time that we have available. So and as much as I like to sell it, I do treat it like a business, but the idea for me as a business is so that it pays for me to be able to go to some of the trade shows. It also helps to pay for me to be able to buy some of the things that I want, not so much that I'm going to make a living at it. But so there is a financial aspect there from that regard as well. And by the way, Sean, it's interesting that you were because I started this a while back too. So, but kind of the same type of concept, although not quite the detail there as well. Again, with the, that type of briefcase and so forth with that. I'm still, as you can see, I'm still working out the hinge arrangement. Again, this was started a couple of years ago. Yeah, hang on a second. Let me kind of.
I'd love to see the design work in there is beautiful. That's some detail.
So
yeah, that's lovely.
And again, to be honest with you, I tweaked some of this, but the original idea behind this, really, I think, was a power team. I think this was kind of a power team type of case. I don't know. You can see the spot to hold the pistol. In there, there's something else.
The AT Secret Agent was my inspiration, right? The old Secret Agent briefcase.
Yeah.
Which was in turn based on Uncle.
So it's like it's just interesting. We're all kind of doing our own thing, but at the same time, we also kind of run some of the same ideas. And it's like, hey, that'd be really cool. I want that little briefcase.
Yeah, we sometimes cross the streams.
So it looks like there's a micro center just west of Boston. I don't know how
awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah, because you could go in at least at my micro center that I have here in Denver. Like you can go in and buy just the screen, just like, so he had that keychain. It was, obviously there was a case and whatever else was inside, but you can go to Micro Center and just like, I want a 1-inch screen, a 2-inch screen, a 3-inch screen, a 4-inch screen, and they're all there.
Yeah. And Micro Center is also probably your best source for 3D printing materials too.
Really? I never thought about that.
Yeah, they sell all brands. You can buy parts. In fact, Micro Center, you can get, every so often they'll run a special where you can get an Ender V2 for $99, because they kind of do, they follow the razor and blade methodology. So they actually sell their own brand of filament, which is called Inland,
which is fine.
Yeah, it works fine. It's not bad filament, and you can get every type and color there too, right in the store. It's
I'm gonna have to check that out, because I buy most of my filament on Amazon because there's no local place to get it. And when you buy on Amazon, you're risking what that color is going to turn out to be like. And I must have 50 reels out there now. About 20 of them are, I tried this color, it just wasn't quite what I wanted. That Micro Center is in Cambridge, which I don't go in very often, but I can go in there and I can actually go in and see that. And if I can see the filament in my hands, I'll know exactly what I'm getting, which is huge benefit.
Yeah, there just aren't stores like this anymore. Like you can go in there and buy every individual piece for a computer and build the computer. Like you just can't find that anyplace else anymore. Yeah, I could go spend a day inside Micro Center.
Yeah. In addition to some of those sources, you can also, if you get to some of the different educational supply places online too, you can pick up individual different color LED lights, different types of AC and DC motors that would work in these type, because basically any type of place that's selling STEM related kits for education to kind of do that, that's going to be a good source where you get your small little toy motors, your different types of resistors, your different types of LEDs, your different types of capacitors and stuff. If you're starting to get into electrical wiring and circuitry to kind of, one of the issues, Sean, and again, going back to that professional courtesy of how I'm amazed by what you do, is like usually the motors that I buy for and bring in for my classes, the little toy motors, they have such a high RPM and low torque. So anytime you start to put a load on it, it's just not going to spin. So, I mean, you have to get into a wiring schematic and you have to start to add capacitors or resistors and other stuff into your circuit to basically get that to do what you want to do. And now we're again, we are upscaling more or less our gameplay here with what we're doing. I do think that the hobby side will go that way, because it is really, really cool to have these type of mechanical motion and stuff in your ability to do that. And about 2 years ago, I will say one other place that you can sometimes find some really cool stuff that you can more or less take apart and use is the five and dimes and some of the dollar stores as well. So I oftentimes will go into like the five, I think they're like five and dimes or five belows. If you're Five Below, and just walk through their toy aisle and pick up different stuff there. I use those in my classes where I have students take them apart and draw those up in CAD. But inside there are all the motors and the gears and so forth that also, if you are trying and wanting to learn how some of this is, there's no better place to learn than some of the existing cheap $5 toys that are out there, where you can take them apart and see how the actual design engineers have basically wired these and brought them together to accomplish that type of motion too. So that, again, you're kind of self-taught on your engineering. So that's my advice to anybody who wants to kind of learn a little bit more about this and how to incorporate it. Go buy those toys and that you can find in Five Below, take them apart, see what motors they're using, see how they're wired, see how the switches are turned on and push buttons, and what the actual mechanical motion is that's there to accomplish that movement.
I find that those geared down motors that I found on Amazon are fantastic, because it's literally, the little tiny box above the motor itself is like 15 gears. I don't know, but it brings that motion down to like a reasonable level for a lot of what we do. I'd like to go to Five Below and get like radio controlled vehicles and stuff, but they move so fast. I want a slow moving vehicle, like like some sort of like robot or something moving slowly across the landscape. Any remote control vehicle you buy today, and you get them for like $5 at Five Below, they're designed for speed, and that's not what we want. It's impossible to take that and further gear it down without extra stress. But these little motors that are already geared down for you are fantastic. You should look those up. I can send you photos and links to that later.
Cool.
Sweet.
Where did Jim go?
Jim kind of went out on us.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I'm sure he's going to come back with something cool. Yeah.
Okay.
I know one of the concepts, and of course, I don't know that we've really been talking too much about the differences between scales here, and that what we're all looking at, which was kind of what the purpose of this was. But I will say some of the interesting things just over the years, and we've all been doing this for 5, 6 or more years, and of course there is some friendly rivalry between Sean, Jim, and I, and I'd also throw out Aaron Luck from Lucky Shot, because he was also one of the earlier people that was doing 3D printing, and he and I have done some of the different panels, talks at like Joe Lana and some of the other shows as well. So there's always some friendly rivalry amongst us on the 1/6 scale. I thought about, I think it was a year and a half ago, the debate started to kind of come up on the 3 3/4 inch Facebook pages, and even on the 1/12 scale Facebook pages, when people started to have arguments back and forth as far as whose design and who had the rights to the design and stuff, which is kind of comical to me, because we're all pretty much copying the original G.I. Joe designers that were doing some of this stuff, with the exception of Sean, because Sean's doing his own thing. And I, like I said, I prefer to do my own thing where I'm kind of doing that too. But in reality, that's not really what sells most for me. What sells the most for me are those reproduction parts that people want to get their stuff back up to play. So I always kind of have, as I've been watching the 3 3/4 inch market and the 6 inch market, it's always kind of funny to me just to watch some of the arguments that go back and forth on some of the Facebook pages as far as who'd create a design, who should have the rights for a design, whether we share it. And Sean, I don't think you've ever really shared any of your designs. I know that Jim and I both at one time shared some of our designs, and we both stopped kind of sharing our designs, predominantly because I did go to one show where I started to see somebody else was printing some of my stuff and selling it, and which wasn't really the reason why I was putting it out there. So, yeah. But it's kind of interesting in the marketplace to me, and I wonder where the hobby will go. And at some of the bickering that kind of goes back and forth on the actual creation of the files. Most of the people getting into the hobby that are wanting to do this, they're just buying the 3D printer, and they think that that's really what 3D printing is. You just buy it. They don't really realize the design process and how much actual time goes into creating the files that you need to print from. So I'll just kind of throw that out as a topic.
I find that the people who are always saying, well, you don't own the design or things like that, are the people who don't know how to design. Right. They just want stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
I find that
they want.
Oh, go ahead.
They want access to be able to print the things. They're saying, well, you made it, but it's really such and such a their IP, and it's like, we get that, but it still took that person however long it took to recreate or to create that or whatever. And for people to just that you get upset, especially with the amount of time that you have taken to do that. You know what I mean?
I've uploaded some things to Thingiverse, not G.I. Joe stuff mostly. My very first version of that Helijet, I uploaded to Thingiverse because I was never going to sell that version. That version was too fragile, and if you want to print it yourself, go right for it. Have it. Do what you want with it. But I would never sell that. I had to redesign it entirely to make it saleable. But a lot of the things I put up on Thingiverse are not G.I. Joe related, and they're not things I care too much about, but I would like other people to have access to. But I've been working in a vacuum for all this time. I didn't even know about Jim and Brad until a few years ago, and I work in a vacuum. I don't get involved with the discussions. I don't get involved with the arguments. I'm not on any of those Facebook pages. But when it comes to, I had a thought. Now I've kind of lost it. But yeah, so it's the sharing of the designs. If I'm not going to sell it, I'm going to put it up on Thingiverse, whatever, maybe so people can use it. I also sold things on Shapeways, a lot of my miniatures, which I don't like really printing in FDM. So I have ray guns up on Thingiverse. Unfortunately, they're gone now. But ray guns, a lot of 1/6 scale small parts. And if you want to go on Thingiverse, Shapeways and order it, feel free. I take like 50 cents commission, and then they make all the rest of the money, but at least you can have it, and I don't have to do any work there. Unfortunately, Shapeways is gone now. A lot of my stuff on Shapeways was actually Space 1999 Eagle parts for the original Dinkies.
Wow.
And I made pods, I made the glider, I made the jet, the dune buggy. I made all these things available on Shapeways, and people bought them occasionally, but I didn't have to do anything with that, and that's not stuff I care about the property of. My own stuff that I make and design, I haven't shared with anybody, and mostly because, I don't want somebody out there selling my jetpack. I put up a really cute little iPod earphone wrap way back, like 2013, and like within months, some guy was selling it on Etsy, and I confronted him. I said, you got my design, and you're selling it on Etsy. And he said, yeah, I made all sorts of improvements. And I looked at it. No, dude, that's my file. There's no improvements. There's no way to improve it. It was perfect.
Mike and I at Joe Fest a couple of years ago, we were just walking through Joe Fest. Mike saw something he had designed, and somebody was selling prints of it, and it's like it happens. And I remember Mike just being like, "I made it. Someone stole my file, and they're selling it." It's official.
Well, you can't steal a file. If he shared it, somebody downloaded it, right?
Well,
right-ish, right?
Technically, any file that you download off of Thingiverse, you can set the parameters on it, and if you say non-commercial, and they take that file and they're starting to sell it, then technically they are stealing. But once you
put something online, once you release a single file to one person anywhere ever, you have lost control of it, and you should have almost no expectation that it's not going to run away.
That's true though. There's a whole bunch of license parameters on Thingiverse. There's Creative Commons, which means feel free, do what you want. And then there's with attribution. So if you want to sell this, just make sure I get some credit. And then right up to commercial. If you're going to sell it, I get some money. And so I don't bother with that. Everything I put up there is Creative Commons. But sharing your stuff is risky, right? If you want to hold on to your stuff, hold on to your stuff, but don't share it.
Yeah. In my case, what I found from somebody that was doing my stuff before me is I take G.I.JOE vehicles from the 80s and I replicate them and I print them for smaller prints. There's, if you printed it up at full size, it would look, blocky as heck. It looked like a Lego piece, but at small scale, it works. The thing is, you want to put non-commercial because then Hasbro can't technically come back to you.
They can come back to you anyway.
They could, but they don't care. But
it could, but they won't.
Yeah, but this guy, he had been one of the first doing this. He had been particularly contacted by Hasbro, and they said, "Listen, put it as non-commercial. We'll let you. We won't make a stink about it."
Yep. Well, I think it's kind of interesting to me. And Mark, I think you and I first met probably at the Augusta G.I.JOE convention. I don't remember whether that was in the summer of 21 or summer 22. I don't remember when the last time I went to there, but that's kind of a prime example because I had a lot of my 3D printed parts there that, of course, in my booth, I was selling. Not that show is not exactly a 1/6 scale collector show, but it was kind of frustrating because there are a couple other dealers that were selling all of the stuff that you can go right onto Thingiverse, download the flexible dragons and all those other type of fidget toys that you're seeing all over at the places at flea markets that people are just downloading, printing, and then turning around and selling. Whether they're following the actual rules as far as that Thingiverse has on there with the licensing rights and fees. Number one, there's no real way for anybody to police this at the moment. But the other thing that I kind of find rather hysterical about it is if you are the person that's designing it, unless you're paying for the software that you're using, if pretty much all of the software that you're using you can use for free, so long as it's for personal use. If you're using it for commercial use, then you need to be paying for the commercial license. And of course, on Fusion, right now anymore I'm using Fusion. In the past I was using Inventor. I mean, those license fees to use that are fairly expensive on a yearly basis. But a lot of people, and on the school-wide, I also will have students use Onshape, which I think is also a great free software for people to learn how to do this. But again, once you cross over where you're starting to sell stuff, well, then you've again broken the license that the actual software companies have put in there. They're okay with you using it for free, but if you start to commercialize it, then you're supposed to be paying them for the use of their software design as well. So that's why I find the whole thing kind of comical and hysterical that a lot of people are sitting here trying to circumvent all these laws that are there in place. I don't know what the answer is in the future because I don't see how it can really be policed just this yet, but who knows? My kids share our TV streaming services, and they're in 2 different places as well. And now both Hulu and Disney Plus are starting to send them emails about them using and sharing our family's source up here because they're in different locations. So I assume that the people who are providing this stuff might eventually kind of put a whammy on that. Remember, if you control the source, you can kind of turn it off and turn it on as well. So it's just kind of one of those things as somebody who's followed all these years in industry that I just kind of find is interesting to watch and see how everybody's responding to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Kind of sad we lost Jim.
Yeah,
Jim should be chiming in on this stuff too.
yeah. Hopefully
So-
he'll pop back in.
Have any of you guys? I mean, I kind of heard it mentioned in the beginning, but as far as scaling is concerned, have any of you guys really tried doing smaller scales? And like, what do you think? Like rate of difficulty, because I think the bigger stuff you can do so much with. What has been your experience trying to do anything smaller?
I haven't done
Design.
small stuff.
I don't find any differences. I don't find any differences in the design. Remember, as a industrial designer, you design in the scale, or you design in 1-to-1 scale. So if you want an object to be and measure 1 inch, when it's done, you design it at 1-to-1 and 1 inch. Now, for what a lot of there are things that I print at both 1/18th, 1/6th, 1/12th scale as well. Typically, I find it works better if I design at the smaller scale, and then I can kind of scale up and it'll still work on some things. There are tweaking that I have to do there. If I design at 1/6 scale and try to convert down just using the scale feature in my slicer, that generally doesn't work. Because if you think about it, if your wall is 1/8 of an inch and then you divide that 18th, if you want to go from 1/6 scale where it's 1/8 of an inch and you go down to 1/18th scale, well, now you're dividing 0.125 by 18, and now you're getting into much, much thinner walls, and it may or may not hold up or print, or you might have a fail. So generally, my recommendation when people ask me a question like that is to start out at your smaller scale and scale up, as opposed to starting out at a larger scale and scale down.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
point.
If you're going to print, if you're designing it to multiple scales, design it for the smallest, and it'll generally work larger. Mostly the reason I don't do smaller things for the G.I. Joe and toy line is that I'm not interested in those scales. I don't have them myself, and it's only recently because the Super Joe is really catching on, or it's really taking off. I never had Super Joes as a kid, and I don't have any Super Joes now. The one I have, Greg sent me so that I could use it as a test sample for scaling.
Would you mind holding that up?
Oh yeah, sure. Oh, where do you go? He's over here. So this is the Super Joe, and the Super Joe is not nearly as flexible, but this actually just worked fairly well on its own at the Super Joe scale. But I didn't design it for that scale. But mostly the reason I don't is because I don't have a lot of interest in the smaller scales. Now, there's stuff I do design. Like I design things, like I said, for the Space 1999 Eagles that are really tiny. Right. And in fact, I don't know if you're familiar with the Konami Eagle. It was made in Japan like 10 years ago, more. And it's like 3.5 inches long, and it's a full Space 1999 Eagle. I don't have one here to show. It's outside. I made pods for that, but I also made the dune buggy, and it is literally it's like a 0.5 centimeter long. You can't print that on an FDM, but you can print it on resin, and some of them that I have here are so tiny and detailed. So, but I designed that at that scale, and the results are absolutely astounding. But mostly the reason I print to the scale I'm interested in, and I'm interested in my 12-inch G.I. Joes, but not the smaller ones. So that's what I do. But then again, like I said, I do other toy lines. I do replacement parts for other lines and things, and those are done at vastly different scales. So it depends on what you want to do.
Okay. Well, do you find yourself, as far as details, and because a lot of designers do this, the bigger you go, the more details you put into the design?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Because you know that when you bring that down, you're not going to see it. So why bother putting it in there?
Yep.
It's just not. And if you're using FDM, it's pointless because you can't see much detail after a certain point. Luckily, 1/6 scale allows you to have a fair amount of detail. Once you get down to 1/12, like which is 6-inch figure, you start to really lose detail. And once you get down to the 3 and a 3.75, which is one of the most popular scales, everybody loves the RAH line. You just need to print that in resin or use Shapeways or some service that prints it in high res, because FDM is just not going to cut it.
Oh, there we go. There's some examples right here. Here's Brad.
Yeah, as for the scaling down,
all right. Well. So, of course, this is from the Adventure Team line, of course, and this is at your 1/6 scale. Now, when we talk about that, of course, the lid pops off of this, and you have some wall thickness there that's done it. Now, that's 1/6. This is your 1/12. I can still incorporate that. The layers, the lines, my FDM printers I got dialed in, they're pretty good with that. And then, of course, even at the 18th scale, 1/18 scale, I can do that as well. But I mean, this is so flimsy there. So if you're really looking at that, you would need to kind of beef that up a little bit, or you might want to beef that up. Now, again, realize if you're brand new to 3D printing, if you're I use Ender 3s there, and that does take some tweaking to get your Ender 3s to print that type of a fine detail. You can do it with a little bit of skill and practice, but this is kind of where we're talking about with some of these things that are going on that you can kind of get there with that. And I took this file originally and just scaled it down in my slicer to get to this, just because that was the easier way. And it was really me testing, hey, can I go that far down with that too? So it's possible. It depends on how good you are and how much, again, you know your process and your machines and how well you got your machine dialed in.
Once you get so small, that wall is just going to be too thin for the slicer to understand, and it's just going to print nothing.
Yep. Now, you can always check that in any slicer by going to the preview and then doing line by line level, and you can actually see what the G code thinks it's going to be doing. So I print in very tiny scale. I use FDM, and as long as I design my parts knowing the limitation of my printer, I get extremely good results in an incredibly small scale.
Well, you make a very good point. You have to know your printer. You have to know what you're doing. You have to know exactly what those tolerances are going to look like.
Yep.
And of course, we only do that through experimentation, right? But once you know your printer, you can do whatever you want.
Yep.
I will say, you know, I know just from my experience that if I'm printing something, anytime I go below 30 thousandths of an inch, 0.030 on my size, that there's going to be a pretty good chance that it falls. That on my printers, that 30 thousandths of an inch is kind of the breakdown for me, where I'm like, I'm not going to try to print anything smaller than that. So I've been successful going down to 20 thousandths of an inch, but then again, it's hit and miss. I will say that if you are switching between scales, most of your software, especially if you're using SolidWorks or Inventor, I don't know yet whether Fusion has this. There are ways that you can kind of design in one scale and then import it using it where it kind of does that for you. And then now we're talking a software issue and knowing, understanding how to use your software to create your files.
Hey, we did have a question in the chat. Somebody was asking what printers everyone here uses. So, like, I use what do I got? An Elegoo Jupiter. I have an Elegoo Saturn, and I have 3 Creality CR10 V3s.
I bought my first printer in 2013. It was an Affinia H479. Then I entered a competition with some of my designs and won a second one. And that's when they were like $2,600 a piece. I have 10 of those now, and I use 4 at a time, and then I use them to swap out because I got a few years ago for like $150 a piece, so I grabbed a few. And over the years, I've collected a bunch of those, and I have not gone up since then, and they just do the job. So, and they're very simple, they're very user-friendly, and the only restriction is they still print at only 0.15 millimeter. Other than that, these printers are workhorses. I don't feel the need to upgrade. Now, I was talking to Jim earlier. One of the reasons I am going to upgrade this spring is because I need to make bigger things. Mine prints a 5x5 cube, and that's it. 5 inch by 5 inch by 5 inch. So I have to break up my things into many pieces. Jim is printing these massive things because he's bought this large, fast printer. I'm going to be buying one of those in the spring, but that'll be the first new kind of printer I bought since 2015, say. So that's these the Affinia H480. They don't even make them anymore, and I've been buying up cheap ones just to get parts, So
yeah,
that's my printer.
Oh, wow.
So one interesting thing I noticed real quick, Sean and Brad, both of you have been talking in inches, which I've lost the ability to do. Everything's millimeters, and it's because of 3D printing. I'm all millimeters now.
Well, I'm Canadian, so I really should be using centimeters anyway. I use inches. I use inches because I'm living in a foreign territory that understands inches. But I work in centimeters. All my modeling is done in centimeters and millimeters.
Yeah.
I've 30 years.
The printer said it was it was 5 inches by 5 inches by 5 inches. So I use what they said.
Interesting.
I'm 30 years in manufacturing as a machinist. Here in the States, our basic unit of the inch is a thousandth of an inch, 0.001. If you think about the size of your human hair, the average human hair is 3/1000ths of an inch thick, or 0.003 thousandths. And that's kind of your machinist talk. And that's where I train. Now, as a machinist, I'm fluent in both metric system and inch system. But again, we are a product of the U.S. education system. So I would ask you all to hold up your fingers and show me what a visual reference of 2 inches is, or an inch, or a half an inch, versus showing me what a visual reference of 20 millimeters is. Most of my students don't really have that visual type of reference, but they need to. And of course, the more you become skilled, the better you get with that. So again, for me, the unit doesn't really matter so long as you know what you're doing and how the relationship between the imperial system and the metric system are there.
See, I think the units matter a lot because I have a digital caliper, and if you work in inches, you're getting 132. What the hell does that even mean? I work in Canada. We switched to the metric system in 1976, and I was 12. So I learned the metric system, and I can only think in metric when it comes to sizes because decimals work, fractions do not. 1/7 of something. What the hell are you going to do with that? You can't do that. You can't use 1/7 in anything.
But see, Sean, as a machinist, I can tell you that 1/32 of an inch is 0.0325. If you ask me what 7/16 of an inch is, I can tell you it's 0.4375.
Yeah, but you're
and
doing
I can
the
use
conversion. You're thinking in decimal. You can't design in fraction. You have to design in decimal.
You would be surprised at a lot of toys if you're back engineering some of the stuff, especially going back to some of the back to the Marx. I tend to bring up some of the Marx designs and the original toy designers. First off, the Marx toy designers were among the best of the best and were well ahead of the game through all the years that Marx was designing these toys. And as you kind of from the from the manufacturing side and from the industrial perspective, as I look at this, as I've gone through and studied their designs, you can see repetition. They're following the standards in industry with your fractions of an inch. And again, this conversation would take us well out of the realm of what we're talking about here for the home hobbyist, because we are really now talking about differences in industry, following industry standards in terms of what the sizes of screws are, what the size of a counterbore hole or countersink hole would be on the size of the screw. And again, that, you know, if you want that, hey, I got room in my college classes, you are welcome to come and attend, and we'd go over all of that stuff. But
well, Brad,
so
Marx was doing their stuff in the 50s. There was no metric system in the 50s.
yeah, it was, and basically Marx went out of business before the metric system even came over here to the United States.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you have to forgive Marx for being a product of their time. But Marx, you're correct. Marx is genius. I have so much Marx stuff. It's beautiful. I love Marx.
Now, in terms of printers that I use, I and Jim kind of uses the same thing. I think we both, although I think Jim has kind of switched printers, but I have a whole bunch of Creality Ender 3s that I've used for years. I've even gotten some of those $99 printers that I have to go all the way up to Chicago, which is about a 2.5-hour drive for me to go to one of the micro centers. So I don't do it very often, but and I have a couple of the CR10s, although I'm not that big of a fan of the CR10 because I've probably had more problems with those. I will tell you on the academic side, I hate MakerBots. I have my $200 Creality Ender 3 is a print horse in comparison to those MakerBots. I've always had issues with the MakerBots. I also have Pruzas at the college where I'm at, so and the Pruzas are okay. We have 3 resin printers, but I can't really tell you what resin printers I have because that's my son's thing, because he likes to print the gaming miniatures and stuff. So it's like if we're doing something like that, I'm like, hey, what resin printer should we get? And I kind of follow his guidelines on it. But again, my printers now, you know, I haven't bought a printer in a while, and there are other ones, newer ones that are out now that do print faster. I know, I think, and that's one of, you mentioned about Jim's, I think he has switched to one of those newer printers that basically it can print about 5 times faster than my
I'm trying to get one of those in the spring.
So
my resin printers are, well, there's 2 of them. I bought one, but then the power supply failed, and instead of just replacing that, I found it was almost cheaper to buy the new one, and the new one had anti-aliasing. So my resin printers are the Anycubic Photon, and there's a problem with those because they use a single drive screw, and you get a lot of warping in the layers. What I need to do next time is get something with a solid drive system that's not going to have layer shifting, and that's what I'm going to probably do in the summer.
Which Anycubic Photon do you have? Is there
Anycubic Photon, I think, is a model, whereas they have other, I don't know. I honestly couldn't tell you right off the bat, and it's out in my garage. So Jim was talking about fumes and stuff, and I print in my garage because I can't print in the house. And that means it's an unheated garage, so I only print from May to October in resin. So I have to get all my printing done in the summer. But the Anycubic Photon was cheap and really cool, but I need something that's not going to have the layer warping. I have seen some resin prints that are so perfectly smooth that I just cry because mine don't do that, and I need to get one of those.
So I picked up the very first Anycubic Photon, and it printed itself to death in relatively short order compared to how long I've had these other machines just run. That thing died.
Mine have been running, except for the power supply, which died on my original. Mine's been running for years and not really any problems with it. So I have to replace the screen every now and then because the screen sometimes breaks, or if any resin leaks onto it, it do a little break the screen and stuff. So I've replaced the screen about 6 times, but luckily they're like $30 a piece. But other than that, it's been pretty good, but I don't think I'd buy another one. The next time I will buy one, it'll have multiple drive shafts so that it smooths out the layering.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know that on the resin side, I think I've tried the Elegoo's and the photons as well, which I get issues with the FET film. I had warping too, and then I had to add more supports, which then means more to processing afterwards and so forth. And my biggest issue with the resin printers, and it's probably something that I'm doing just because it's not. I will be honest with you. I really don't like resin. I love the results that I can get with the resin printers, but I really don't like working with the resin printers at all. So I also have had to replace FET film on it quite a bit, probably much more frequently than I think. I'm like, okay, I've only gotten like 10. I've only ran 10 prints off of that. Now I got to replace the FET film, and
I'll get 30, 40 prints, but FEP is meant to be replaced because it wears. It wears, it tears, it warps. FEP, you can't rely on the FEP to stay too long. But I've gotten quite a few prints. But I buy the FEP by the sheets of 10, and I have them ready to replace. And luckily, the replacement process is fairly simple. So, but yeah, if you let your FEP get worn, your results are going to suck anyway. So, and your failure rate's going to raise up.
Yeah.
It's meant to be replaced.
Yeah, but the trick with extending the life of your FEP is to touch it as little as possible.
I just really dislike that process. I love when I get the results that I get. I just hate having to do all of it to get it done.
Understood. That's something I sometimes have a gripe about. I love my resin printers, but yeah, you there's a lot of tinkering around. You have to do a lot of maintenance and things, and if that process could become easier somehow, it would be welcomed.
Well, sorry, I had to drop out there for a minute, a little family emergency. So, I beg
so the question that's kind of going around is, what printers do you use?
Yeah, a couple of points I wanted to make on that. I've been using. At one point, I was up to about a dozen printers. I think at one point. Most of them, your $150 Creality Ender 3 style printers, and they function. They actually were pretty reliable. There was a little bit of bed leveling that had to take place, but they would just keep going. Sometimes you'd have to do nozzle clearing or whatnot, and I didn't know any better. And then our university picked up a Bamboo Labs X1 Carbon. Mostly as an experiment, because this was a new printer, new company. Nobody really had any experience with them. And wow, they really had a paradigm shift as far as filament style printers go. They are enormously reliable, fast, easy to use, fantastic results. And so after about 6 months of our makerspace running this thing pretty much 24 hours a day, 7 days a week under student use, and it was still going great, I decided, well, that's good enough test for me. I'm willing to invest, $1,500 on this thing. It can print. I can do 8 colors on this one printer. It can print 8 colors. So, in fact, what I'm printing right now are these things. Anybody recognize that?
Let me see. Yes.
I'm not sure which.
Well, maybe up here
that is.
It's the X-wing pilot's chest box.
Okay.
So it's not 1/6 scale; it's 1:1 scale stuff. But that's printed in full color, which is 4 colors, because that's how many colors is on that. But it's super cool.
I think I'm going to want that printer, Brad, Jim. When I think you sent me a link to that printer in the spring. When I get my bonus, I'm buying one of those.
Yeah, they're really fast. And one of my coworkers bought one about this a little bit before I did, and he bought a .2 nozzle because he wanted to see if he could print, the Dungeons and Dragons minifigures with that. And believe it or not, he could. So that printer with a .2 nozzle, you lose your speed, but you gain really good detail out of it.
Wow.
I'm not saying it's high-end resin printer quality, but for the kind of stuff we do, it's darn close. And so I was completely blown away.
This is my FDM, and I'm printing like a Mighty Max figure that's like it's a centimeter and a half tall, Brad, centimeter and a half. And I mean, it is not perfect and it's not resin, but it's pretty damn good.
Yeah. The
And
dot
that's
two
that's a,
nozzle
that's a
for
10-year-old printer.
the dot two nozzle on those Bamboo Lab printers. Yeah, that's something else. That is amazing how small you can go and still maintain detail.
You sold me.
Yeah. So my suggestion is, and they make a couple of different tiers. They make a bed slinger and then they make a Core XY style one. I've got both. I was able to replace about 5 of my printers with just those 2 printers.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so the cool thing about having one with the different filament options, different colors, is you don't have to unload and then reload with another color. You just tell it, okay, I want to print red this time, switch over to the red roll and let it go. So
Like that.
pretty cool stuff. We at the Makerspace, we also are a Prusa shop, and we have some Mark III pluses and we have some Mark IVs. And those are fantastic printers. They're workhorses. They run all the time, but they're not as fast, and they're single color. And so, it's sort of like, okay, well, and they're not really cheap. We buy them as kits, so we put them together and we save some money that way. But there's a lot of competition in the space right now. And I was reading through some of the comments, and one of the things that people were asking about is larger format printers. I have a couple of different large format printers. I have an Anycubic Cobra Max, Cobra 2 Max. It does about 450-ish millimeter cubed. I have their mid-size printer as well. It's the Anycubic Cobra 2 Plus, and I have it up at the Makerspace now because they needed to print some large stuff. A Creality CR10 S5. That was a 500 millimeter cubed machine. That's where it really gets kind of iffy, because if you're looking at this next generation, this post Bamboo Labs generation of printers, and you want to go big, you don't have a whole lot of options available to you. Creality has a couple of different, I think they're calling theirs the K series, K1s and K2s. Right now, the K2 Plus seems to be the thing that everybody's looking at. It's it can do multicolor and it can go big. It's 350 millimeter cube. But they're brand new. They just were released back in October. So nobody's had one long enough to figure out, is it going to have longevity or not? Are there going to be available parts or not? Is their support going to be able to support you if you have a problem or not? Is the firmware upgradable or not? I mean, is it a closed system or is it open source like a Clipper based setup or not? So time will tell on that. My experience with Creality was they kind of followed the leader and made it cheap. Most of their Ender 3 printers were a copy of a Prusa. So this appears to be a copy of a scaled up Bamboo Labs printer. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm on the fence as to whether or not picking one of those up. Rumor has it that Bamboo is supposed to have a new printer release this first quarter of 25. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, you can tell from the pricing that they're liquidating their older ones.
Yep, they sure are. But right now is a good time to get into those X1 carbons. Those things are fantastic. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go about that.
Nope.
On the larger size printers there too, over the years I've had a few of the Creality CR10s. I'm not exactly, where I was happy with the Ender 3s, I wouldn't say that I was as happy with the CR10s, because I would, for the larger prints, I would get about a year out of the CR10s where they would work okay, and then they would just seem to kind of out on me, and then I'd be either trying to fix them, and it seems like I was always chasing things down a rabbit hole on the CR10. So I've kind of since stopped doing some of the larger size stuff until I could find what I consider more reliable printer on that size. But yeah, the field is still constantly changing in all of the printers, and of course, even on the scanning side too, with what the future is, the scanning technology has gotten much better too. So it all depends on what you want to get into, and just kind of whichever one you buy. I think if you join some of the different groups that are out there to kind of help problem solve and troubleshoot when you run into issues on them.
I think that's a big piece of the puzzle is the support side, the community involvement, the peers, the people that actually have these things and run them and can offer suggestions. I know most of the major printer companies have some sort of forum on Facebook or some sort of group or a YouTube channel that provides support. That it's really big on the bamboo side of things because they felt like the thing that was missing in the 3D printing world was an appliance-like printer. Instead of a gadget that you tinkered with, you just have a tool that you hit print and off it goes, and you don't really have to fuss with it much. So I'm not trying to say I'm a Bamboo Labs fanboy. If there was a better printer in the same price range out there, I'd be a fan of it as well. It's just it's really gotten a lot of the market attention right now. So if you're thinking about printers, that's one you really want to think about. So
Jim, I think there was something that I just seen just this weekend, just within the last couple of days, and I think it was Bamboo. I could be wrong, but one of these companies is going to, or was talking about going to cloud-based stuff, and it sounds like they're trying to kind of rein some stuff in from open source. So I don't remember if that was Bamboo. I was trying to find the article or find where I had seen that, but one of these companies is kind of I think trying to switch everything to a cloud-based system, including the slicer and stuff for it too, where it won't be as easy or user-friendly for people unless they're buying their subscription.
Yeah, that would be bad news. Right now, I'm aware of a firmware that you have to authenticate more robustly that Bamboo Labs is working on to try to improve. I think they've gotten some of their printers hacked in the past. Because you could print through a mobile device on your phone or whatever, and it wasn't as secure as it needed to be. I know Anycubic had a real problem with that because they were using some clear text or something as part of their password things, and so they needed a major upgrade in their security. So I wouldn't be too surprised. I've also heard that because 3D printers can be used to make all sorts of things, legal and illegal. That there's an attempt by some of the companies to crack down on basically it proofs your file before you print, and if it's something that you're not supposed to be able to print, it blocks you. That's another one that's been toyed around with.
Oh, wow.
And that gets into a whole big can of worms there. So.
Yeah.
You know,
number one question I get asked by students all the time is, can we 3D print a gun? So that's the number one question I get asked by students. It's like, yes, you can, but would you want to? And again, if you want to go up against the ITAR compliance stuff with the federal government, get yourself into trouble. That's up to you. But I, for one, especially since we were talking earlier about some of the strength of materials between ABS and PLA, I certainly wouldn't want to pull those triggers.
Nope.
Oh, I make guns all the time. Like, this is my ray gun.
Yeah, Sean, they're not really talking about our toy guns.
But I used when I first got my printers, every year I'd come up with a new ray gun. This is one of my favorites. But yeah, I don't get involved in that nonsense. Printing guns, for God's sake.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I print miniature guns,
All right, guys, we are coming up on 2 hours, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I do want to thank you guys again for coming out, and it's been great kind of observing the conversation a little bit, and it's a lot of the same stuff we've talked about kind of again and again, but great hearing it from some other talking heads for a change.
Other experts. Yep.
Kind of, makes you feel good. Like, hey, because a lot of people start out working in a vacuum, and then when you come together, you find a lot of times either someone else has a much better solution that you can steal, or you find that you came to the same conclusion ultimately. So it's kind of cool to hear both. So, If anyone in the chat's got any kind of last minute questions for these guys, kind of get it in there now, and we'll see if we can get it answered before we jump off.
Okay.
State of New York.
Well, the first thing I'll say, of course, is thanks for inviting me on. I appreciate it. I don't always have as much time anymore to do the design work that I'd like to, and to make the toys, especially on the education side, where I'm doing a lot on with my students. So it kind of takes away from the hobby. So it is always nice when I can come back and have a few minutes just to kind of talk about and share the hobby and some of the reasons why I like doing some of the stuff I like to do.
The Dallas Fort Worth, the DFW show this last March or whenever it was, this summer, and that's the first time I met Jim. I met Jim at his table and his wife, his lovely wife, and then I met Brad, and I realized that I was going to go to their talk because it was one of the highlights. And then Jim said, "Well, you got to come on and do the talk." I said, "Okay, sure." And Greg, who organized the thing, said, "I didn't even know you were coming." I said, "Dude, I told you months ago I was coming down there." But I went just to do the show, and then luckily Jim said, "Hey, you should join me on the panel." So it was a really good talk, and I'm glad Greg finally got the video out. So it was really nice meeting these guys. It was first time meeting in person, and I don't know if I'm going to go to another show anytime soon, but I will keep going occasionally. So hopefully I'll get to meet up with them in the future. But yeah, it was nice to be here. Nice to talk about these things. Like I said, I do work in a vacuum mostly. So any chance I get to, kind of talk about this is fine by me. And if you want to hit me up, any of the guys on the panel, if you want to hit me up privately later, talk about stuff, whatever, hit me up.
Cool.
And Sean, it's interesting that you say that, because one of the first comments I heard from Buddy Finethy, who, Buddy is a longtime collector and is one of the people responsible for Joe Lana and Toy Lana down there in Georgia. One of the first comments he made to me is like, "I've been trying to get you three together for years." So it was kind of fun that we were all able to get together at the DFW show, and of course now we gave Greg bragging rights that he was able to do that over Buddy. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it was great for us all to be able to do that.
Well, I certainly enjoyed
Buddy through my. Sorry, go ahead, Jim.
I was just going to say I certainly enjoyed having y'all with me up on stage at the DFW show, and it was certainly great to be invited back to have you guys on this show, this podcast. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, same here. When I first started the Huxter Labs kind of thing with Greg, Buddy drew me as a cartoon figure with a lab coat and a ray gun, and I use that for my avatar all the time.
Oh, how funny! Okay.
Yeah. I have yellow gloves on and everything.
When I do the shows, I bring a box of failed prints, just
yes.
kind of, junk pile or whatever. Now we call it the box of broken dreams. Yeah. And Buddy bought the whole thing from me that first time. So a whole box of broken dreams. He was going to.
We all have those, Jim.
We got a ton of that. Oh man. As I was telling our guys, basically, this is going to be interesting. This is going to be like sitting back and listening to ourselves.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Oh, how fun.
Just different, you guys kind of focus on a different scale, and it's really, really cool to see kind of the working toys that you're coming up with, and learning that if you kill Santa Claus, you got to use all the parts.
Yeah. Hey, that was my big takeaway.
So next weekend is Winterfest. So that's the winter version at Kentuckiana. I'm going to that. Are any of you guys going to that?
No.
No?
No. At this point, go ahead.
Okay. No, I'm not going to be able to make it. I did do a batch of Spanish conquistador helmets and chest plates for Greg Ator. He's going to be there. This was Terry Lee Sayers' partner at those shows. This was some stuff I had done for Terry back before he passed away. So that's my involvement with the Winterfest at this point.
Okay.
I try to do one show a year at the most.
Okay.
I usually do the Kentuckiana show. It is the closest one for me to get to. I'm generally always there set up as a dealer in the summer months. I have been back and forth over Winterfest. Unfortunately, you know, when I'm teaching during the school semester, it's kind of hard for me to get away to some of the those shows. I love to go down to Joe-Lana or to Toylanta in March. But generally, the only times I've been able to do that is when it lines up with my spring break, and providing my wife doesn't want to go someplace for a spring break.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to me when I'm in the semester to get away. At this point, I'm kind of on the fence. I do sometimes just shoot down to Louisville for the day and then back up. I'm kind of planning on doing that next Saturday, but I'm not 100% sure yet whether I will be able to or not. So if I do make it down, I hope to see some of you down there.
Cool. All right. So that's next weekend, February 2nd. We're going to have some folks on. We'll be talking about selling, like the topic is selling your 3D prints. The weekend after that, the 9th, we'll have Corey Cantaloupe. He's a former sculpt manager from Hasbro. He'll be on. And then the 16th, we've got Derek Hicks on to talk about his 12-foot USS Flag.
Oh, yeah.
So that's going to be better him than me, man. But that thing is gorgeous. So I'm pretty excited for that show. So that's about it. Thanks again for joining us today. And we'll see you guys next time.
Pleasure being here. Thank you.